I'm going to show you exactly how I color grade my videos step by step, and in the process show you how to get those beautiful cinematic rich colors that you can then add into your videos to make them truly stand out. Okay, so here we are in Final Cut Pro, and as you probably know by now, this is my editing software of choice. Now here on the timeline, I've got 3 different example clips that I am going to be grading. Now showing you how I grade, they're all a little bit different in their own ways, and I'll get into that a little bit later. But as you can see, this footage is in a log profile. So I shoot everything in C-Log 3 on my R6 Mark II, and that way I can get the most dynamic range and flexibility when it comes to color grading in post-production. As you can see here in this shot, I've got all the detail in the midtones and shadows on the interior, but I also have a lot of detail in the highlights and in the exterior, which is super important because you don't want your exteriors, your windows, to be completely blown out. It looks amateurish, it looks unprofessional. Shooting in log will help you be able to retain a lot more of that detail. So once I'm ready to color grade my footage, I'm going to go over to my titles panel. I'm going to get an adjustment layer and I'm going to drag that over my footage. Now the reason I like to color grade using adjustment layers is because it's easy for me to kind of visualize the layers of where my adjustments are. Plus I can make mass adjustments over a lot of footage versus individual clips. So now I'm actually going to duplicate this layer. I'll talk about that in a little bit. Now the first thing we have to do is take our log footage and convert that into Rec 709. Now, if you don't know what Rec 709 is, it's just a normal color profile. We're gonna make this footage look quote unquote normal. So I'm gonna go over to my effects panel. I'm gonna search for LUT, drag this custom LUT onto the bottom adjustment layer. As you can see, it's gonna pop up here in my effects panel. Select the drop-down menu, and right here is my Canon C-Log 3 to Rec 709 LUT. I'm going to select that, and now my footage looks, well, normal-ish. It doesn't look great, but it looks a lot better versus the log profile. Now, it is important to notice right here in my LUT settings, I'm keeping the input and output to Rec 709 and my mix at 100%. I'll have a link in the description for this exact C-Log 3 to Rec 709 conversion LUT. And the great thing about that link is that you can actually download pretty much every single popular log to Rec 709 conversion LUT, no matter the brand you're shooting on, which is super handy. So you can go pick that up there if you don't have a conversion LUT already. Now that the footage is converted to Rec 709, let's get into the actual color grading. For my actual grade, now I'm gonna hop up to this second adjustment layer. And the first thing I'm gonna start off with is a color wheels adjustment. My signature look is kind of a subtle teal and orange. And so I'm gonna show you exactly how to do that. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna jump into my color wheels adjustment. I'm gonna start with my shadows. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna start pushing my shadows, pushing kind of a teal hue into the shadows, bluish teal. You can kind of mess around a little bit to see what works. Kind of right about there starts to look good. Now to complement that, I'm gonna hop over to my highlights panel and start pushing my highlights into kind of the more orange yellow. Actually more orange. As you can see, as we play around from kind of the yellow to red hues, it's really looking like I'll need a deeper orange, even more red type of hue in the highlights. Now it's important, you don't want to put too much orange in the highlights because as you can see, that starts to affect kind of the walls and the sky. And we don't want yellow or orange walls. If it is a little bit too strong or affecting parts of the image that I don't really want, as you can kind of see, the sky is looking a little bit too yellow. I can come here and I'm gonna desaturate the highlights a little bit. So you can see that's gonna take some of the saturation out of the walls and a little bit out of the sky, so we have a more neutral, more natural looking image. Once I've got the teal and orange to my liking, I'm gonna head over to the global wheel. I'm actually gonna boost the overall saturation a little bit just to make the colors pop and make the image feel a little bit more vibrant and full. Now the final adjustment that I'm gonna make here in my color wheels panel is actually scroll down a bit to the tint, and I'm gonna push this to be a little bit more green. Not very much, about -3 is where I usually put it. And that's because I found the footage from the R6 Mark II is a little bit, just ever so slightly on the purple side. So this green isn't too much of an actual grade, it's just to kind of counteract that purple coming from the image. Now that I'm done with the color wheels, I'm gonna head over to the hue and saturation curves. This is where I'm gonna do a little bit of color manipulation. So the first thing that I'm gonna do is I'm gonna select kind of my orangey yellow hues, and I'm gonna push these up ever so slightly. Really not much, even right here, just to make that really emphasize the orange in the teal and orange. It's gonna make these colors pop a little bit more. Then I'll go and select kind of my blue hues, and I'm gonna push these to be a little bit more teal. The key is to make these adjustments very minimal. Now this is going to really emphasize that teal and orange look that I'm going for. Now we're gonna move down to the hue versus saturation curves. Now I actually like to very slightly kind of desaturate the blues, desaturate the teals just a little bit. That's typically to help with any kind of blue color casting that's coming in from the windows, and it just helps with making the sky not so vibrant. Next thing I'm gonna do is come over to kind of the yellow and green tones, and I'm gonna desaturate these actually quite a bit. These yellow and green type of color casts typically end up in the walls, in the ceilings, and even in the shadows a little bit. So I'm gonna start dragging these down to kind of get to a point where they're not totally desaturated, but they're pretty close. So you can kind of see if I were to go, real saturated versus really kind of bring those down. There was some green in the walls, in the shadows a little bit, and maybe even desaturate these yellows a tiny bit. So now it's looking like we have a much more balanced image. Obviously this is a bit more of a stylistic look, but we still maintain the integrity of the walls, the ceilings, the shadows. The colors do still look natural, and that is what we're going for. Not over the top, subtle, stylized, natural. Now my last step for the overall base grade is to head over to the color adjustments and add a little bit of contrast. I typically like to put this between kind of 15 and 20. Really not overdoing this, it's just to add a little bit extra pop to those colors. All right, so there you have it. That is my base grade. That is my signature teal and orange look. And you can see that that grade has been applied to all 3 clips. But we're not done yet. We still have to go into each individual clip and adjust them to make sure that they look absolutely perfect. So as I'm looking here at this image of the penthouse unit, the first thing that stands out to me is that obviously the highlights, these windows are pretty blown out. And if you recall from the log shot, which I will show you right here, we still have detail in those highlights. You can see the sky, you can see the clouds, but because of the Rec. 709 conversion, that has actually blown those highlights out. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select the individual clip, and we're going to correct for this. Now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna head over to my color wheels adjustment. Again, now I'm on the individual clip. This is not being applied to the overall color grade. This is the individual clip. I'm gonna head over to my highlights, and I'm gonna start dragging these down. As you can see, as I drag down my highlight slider, that detail in the sky is really coming back. Now I could go really extreme and see that's about as much detail as there was. That's obviously too dark, so I'm gonna bring this back up. But I'm gonna find a healthy balance where we can start to see a little bit of definition in those clouds. Now that obviously the highlights, those windows are pulled down, the interior is looking a little bit too dark. So to fix that, I'm gonna head over to my midtones wheel. I'm gonna start to push my midtones up a little bit to kind of where, now I'm only looking at the midtones. You can see the highlights are getting a bit brighter, but I'm only looking at the interior right now. So I'm thinking right about there starts to look good. But now that the midtones have been pushed up, you can see we started to lose a little bit of contrast in the shadows. Now to counteract that, head over to the shadows and start to pull those down until we get a nice contrasty look. Now that is looking so much better. I might even pull those highlights down a little bit more, and the sky is still looking pretty orange, so I might even desaturate those highlights just a touch more. Again, a lot of this is trial and error, just finding a balanced look that I like. I'm pretty happy with this. I might even boost those midtones a little bit more. And there we go. We still have full detail in the midtones, in the shadows. We have a nice, rich, contrasty look, and we still get a lot of that detail in the highlights. We're not getting all of it, but we're still getting so much more. You can see definition of the clouds, and that is just a really nice looking shot. One thing I'm still noticing is this shot still looks a little bit too purple. So I'm gonna head over to the tint slider, maybe drag that down, maybe 1, maybe 2. Yeah, that looks really good. I'm quite happy with how that looks. That is going to be the final graded shot for this penthouse image. As you can see, it's a very well balanced image. It's stylized, but it still looks natural, still looks cohesive with how this penthouse unit actually looks while you're there. Now moving on to our second shot, you can see it's this nice composition of this living room, but obviously the first thing that stands out to me is this shot is overexposed. And so to fix that, I'm gonna head over to my color corrections into a color wheels adjustment. And I'm gonna start with just bringing down the highlights. As you can see, as we bring down those highlights, we get a lot of detail back, right? So here's before, if we're looking kind of here in the highlights, and especially right here on the rug, as we bring those highlights down, we get a lot of that detail come back. And I might even bring the shadows down a little bit just to add a little extra contrast in the backs of those chairs and the fireplace. And I mean, that just looks really nice. That's a very well balanced shot. And if we look at the before and after with just the grade, you can see that we have nice vibrant colors. The oranges are popping, the teals are popping, but again, not overkill. And now for our final shot, we have this nice exterior facade shot. And I mean, this already looks really, really good. If we show the before and after of the grade, again, really nice teal and orange look. However, one thing that I'm not really loving too much, and again, this is why we do the individual clip adjustments, is the trees and the grass are not as vibrant, not as saturated as I would like. And that's because, as you can see here in our curves, we actually desaturated those colors. So I'm gonna come here into the individual clip, head over to the hue saturation curves, go to my hue versus saturation curve. I'm just gonna make a pretty vast selection of kind of the greens and yellows. I'm just gonna start pushing those back up. Another point here, and head over to the color wheels and ever so slightly boost the mid-tone saturation. There we go. This was shot in the fall, so obviously we have the very nice fall colors even during golden hour. So we want to maintain those. We want to make sure that this footage pops, it looks inviting, and it really stands out. So if we show before and after those adjustments, you can see that we really brought in those nice, rich summer/fall colors back into the image. So hopefully this video showed you that color grading isn't a really intimidating or intensive task. What I love about color grading is that it's subjective. At the end of the day, this is art. So if you want to mess around and try out different colors and different looks, go for it. Or if you want to copy my exact color grading settings, again, be my guest. That's why this video is here. So if you found value out of this video, I'm sure that this video right here will serve you quite well. And if you have any questions, please feel free to leave them down in the comments. Peace.